Hey folks, I want to welcome everybody this morning for our conversation with Cantor David Fair. Let's see, somehow Myra has captured the spotlight, and so let me try and do this. So our conversation with Cantor David Fair, who will be joining us, and we're so glad to have apparently very well connected to our congregation as a cousin of many of our members, and also someone who's been out and talking about topics of racial justice, particularly in a Jewish setting. David, I'm going to give a brief introduction to you, and then you can correct and expand as much as you think is necessary. I do want to mention, for those of you just coming on, our conversation is being recorded. We will, David and I will have our conversation for 40 to 45 minutes. If you have questions that you're interested in that we don't get to, please feel free to write them in the chat. And towards the end of our conversation, we'll make sure to try and address as many of those as possible. Cantor David Fair joins us, introduced to me by Barbara Novick, his cousin, who heard Cantor Fair speaking at another synagogue's program on the current state of racial justice and protests and the Black Lives Matter movement and such. Knew I was interested, that we are interested in exploring some of these topics, and I've had the opportunity to have a couple of really delightful and intriguing and provocative conversations with David since then, and I'm looking forward to having another one this morning with all of you here to join us. David's background comes at this from a very personal level. David's mother is a white Jewish woman. David's father is a Catholic Black man, not so practicing as I understand, although feel free to correct me on that, David, and raised as a Jew of color, has spent a lot of time in Jewish settings, and I think because of that has a unique perspective and an opportunity to teach us about the connection between those identities of being Jewish and being Black. So David, I'll ask you to sort of expand from there and maybe tell us a little bit about your background, your journey, and your experiences in Jewish spaces, and we'll launch off from there.
Well, I'd be most happy to tell you. So hi, everybody. I'm so glad to meet you all. This is so delightful and exciting. And I have several family members. I almost said I have several family members with you all. My cousin Lauren and Barbara and my uncle Mitchell and all sorts of people. And I'm delighted to be here. So as the rabbi said, you know, I have I like to say a very blessed and exciting and powerful role in my life, because I was born of so many minorities. Dad Black, mom white Jewish. I'm also gay, and I as a kid, I definitely was a lost little soul who didn't know which kids to hang out with, getting made fun of for the way I walked and talked and moved. And I'm not going to tell you that childhood was easy to navigate all of those groups. I certainly had a lot of trouble. But I also feel like I had a really wonderful childhood, and I feel like I was a very happy kid. For the record, I don't really feel that I grew up in an interfaith household, because my father was completely not religious in any way. The only times I ever went into churches were for the myriad of funerals and weddings that I went to. And oddly enough, I've sang at many, much more Black Catholic funerals than I have at Jewish funerals. But anyhow, so yeah, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and my family, we were a staple of our congregation, our conservative congregation. And we would go, I mean, we were there, I would say, anywhere from 3 to 5 days a week there, because there was religious school Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. And I loved going Fridays and Saturdays. I think it was because, the part of Baltimore that we lived in, which is southwestern Baltimore County, there's no Jews for dozens of square miles. We were the sole Jewish family. And so to be Jewish was so exciting. For me, it was like, I mean, the way my mom made it sound like, it was like everyone in the world is some religion, but we are Jews. And I actually grew up thinking that there wasn't any other religion. And I remember asking my mom once, so we're Jewish, so then is Grandma Rose nothing? Grandma Rose was my father's mother. And she said, no, but that's how much Judaism was part of my life. But as much as I'd love to tell you all about my Jewish story and what led me to apply to Cantorial school, by the way, I'm not yet a Cantor, so Rabbi, please call me David. I will be a Cantor in 2021 in May. I'm here to talk about how we as Jews can be anti-racist educators. And I specifically feel that white Jewish people can really take a very active role in being an anti-racist educator in the world. And what I really don't want white Jewish people to feel is guilty or part of the problem, or there's nothing I can do, it's just too big, because it's really not true. And I mean, I'm not entirely sure what the rabbi wants me to do as far as just giving a great lecture or not, but there's so much that a white Jewish person is blessed to be able to do in this world. People say that privilege, people have this idea that privilege is a bad thing. I'm not privileged, but the thing is, you being privileged is a gift. You being privileged means that you can do things. Your voice has a special and really loud presence in the world. You as a white Jew I honestly feel like you all can change the world. And the thing is, yes, I know that people like myself, I go into Jewish spaces and people generally welcome me, but I don't quite look exactly like I'm a white person. People generally love to think I'm Egyptian or somewhere in South America. It's people like you all who, when you open up your mouths, other white people are listening. So Rabbi, I don't know if that's exactly what you wanted me to say, but that's what came out of my mouth right now. Is there anything specifically?
Yeah. So let me ask you a few questions, and we'll try and I want to hear everything you have to say, but we'll try and organize it with a few questions. I want to remind folks that while you all have a voice and we want to hear that voice, we don't want to hear that voice on this call. So if you're joining and I mute you, please keep yourselves muted. If you have questions and you want to ask, please write them in the chat, and we will be sure to take some time towards the end of our conversation, which will last about an hour, to get to them. So David, so first of all, by the way, there's Cantor as like the piece of paper and on the wall, and there's Cantor of those who serve in that role, which you do and have at several congregations. So I'll call you David if that's what you prefer, but you're still a Cantor in all of our books. And so what I'd like to do is structure the conversation sort of very locally to our Westchester Jewish Center, although I think that what you have to say and teach us will likely apply to many synagogues out there. And then to expand a little more to the bigger movements and what's going on in the world. So to start, I'd like, maybe you can address, from what you've seen, you've been in lots of different synagogues, you've been a newcomer in a synagogue, you've been the synagogue where you grew up and whatnot. What would you want us to know as white Jews, when someone who is not white walks into our synagogue? You know, what have you experienced? What have you heard from other people that we may be doing that has unintentionally created an uncomfortable environment for people of color or Jews of color, to start really locally, which is where I always like to start. You know, how can we be more aware, and what would you want us to know about these issues for us right here at the center?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I'm so glad I have people that really are open to new ideas. So I'll tell you something. So I am in the process now of thinking, where do I want to be a cantor in this country? And something that all people of a minority, including Jews like yourselves, do when we travel, our first thought is, will I be safe there? So I would imagine, as you know, well, I don't have to imagine this, as Jewish people, you're thinking, do I want to take a vacation in the middle of rural Alabama? I don't know. There could be anti-Semitism. So I assume you go online, you ask friends, you try to get a sense of what some place is going to be like before you go there. Certainly as a Black person, I am always on the radar. There are certain neighborhoods, right even in Brooklyn, I'm just like, is this going to be a safe place for me? And when a Jew of color, or maybe not even a Jew yet, maybe a person of color, is thinking about becoming a Jew, and they are, I call it shul hopping. They are trying to find which shul to be a part of. They're looking for which shul will be safe for them. And the way they do that is by going on different shuls' websites. And the reason I'm saying this to you all and not to the board is because you all, as congregants of your congregation, have huge power. And by you all going to your board and introducing these ideas, that is so much more powerful than if they hired me as a consultant. So I'm going to say real quickly, when you go on the Westchester Jewish Center website, which I have done, I'm finding some things about the website that are a little challenging for me. What I look for on every website is what I call the diversity statement. That is the statement that says, you are welcome. And I'm not going to talk about what's on your website. I'm going to talk about what's on other websites. So, for example, when I go to a synagogue called Kolot Chayenu, which is right here in Brooklyn in Park Slope, they have Black Lives Matter banners on the homepage. Then I click on, I'm doing it right now just to be able, so then they, at the top of the page, it says they have lots of sections. So when I click on who we are, and then I click on missions and values, it says, we share a commitment to ending structural racism and becoming an anti-racist congregation. And as individuals of varying sexual orientations, gender identities, races, family arrangements, and Jewish identities and backgrounds, we search for meaningful and just expressions of our Judaism in today's uncertain world. I gotta tell you, as a person of color, I see that and I'm like, oh my God, this is where I belong. This is a place that really cares about me. Oh my God, Rabbi, you're actually sharing the screen. That's awesome.
I just thought it would help if people could
Oh,
see it.
sure. Yeah.
So
So,
this diversity is a hallmark. This paragraph here is what David's referring to.
yeah. And so, and that's awesome. Now, even better is actually, it's not better. No, it's rare to find a place that's perfect. When I go to Central Synagogue's website, it's right on the home page. And on the home page, the very first thing, so they're by putting that statement on their homepage, they're making a statement. They're making a priority. They're telling me their priority is letting people like myself know we encourage participation from all who seek a connection to Jewish life and want to be part of our sacred community, regardless of religious background, race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status. That's a huge one. Ability, age, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Now, I really like that. What I don't like is that they use the word regardless. You know, I mean, regardless isn't necessarily a word that says including, but they're trying. Now, the thing is, I could go to so many websites. I researched so many websites in preparation for this talk. And I could go to so many websites and show you varying degrees of that statement. When I was on the phone with the rabbi last week, and we were talking about your synagogue, you all do have a statement like that on your website. It's a bit buried. It's a little challenging for me to find. And it doesn't include language like people of color or different races. And you might be saying to yourself, well, but it says we include all. It says we're welcoming to everyone. And the thing is, when you have a statement like that, somebody who is a minority doesn't know what that statement means. Because, you know, I'm thinking as a gay person, in fact, I have a very distinct example, which is that there's an Orthodox synagogue around the corner from me that's actually open for services. And there are no Reform synagogues or conservative open for services. And I decided I wanted to go and check them out. And I went on their website and they have language that says we are welcoming to everyone. But I don't think they're welcoming to gay people. So I'm not going to go there. I actually did go there, but I was uncomfortable. But so that's an example. Now, what more that you all can do as human beings and not necessarily pressuring the board is something I want to talk about when you are at, let's say your services start at, I don't know, 6 o'clock. And at 5:30, that's when all the Jews are schmoozing in the main area, the lobby, and you see a person of color walk in. Now, okay, this is exciting. This is a moment when you can act as you. So the first thing I want you to do is, first and foremost, pretend that they're not a person of color, but also be very much aware that they're a person of color. So what I mean is, when you see a person of color come in, it's even more important to walk up to that person than you would someone who is white, but clearly has a look on their face that they've never been there before and they're a little nervous. You walk up to this person. Don't be afraid to be a little obnoxious. You can be obnoxious. You have my permission. Walk up to them with a smile. Say, "Hi, I'm Janine. What's your name? Welcome to Westchester Jewish Center. Have we met before? Am I being forgetful?" So all of a sudden, they now have a person who's interacting with them, who wants to know them. And I was also very careful with my language there. Instead of saying something like, "Is it your first time here?" or have you been here before? I said, have I met you before? Because perhaps they have been there before. And by you saying something like, oh, have you been here before? It sort of erases their past experience. It makes them feel like, what? I was invisible? Anyway, okay, you see them, you walk up, you say, hi, I'm Janine, I'm so excited to meet you. The next thing, number 2, assume that they are Jewish, because a person of color, I mean, I'm thinking of my friend Marcus in particular, he walks in and he told me that a woman handed him a pamphlet about conversion. Oh, and he, by the way, he was Jewish. He had actually converted several years ago. He was not born Jewish like myself, but he is Jewish. Anyway, so when you assume that somebody is not Jewish, I'll be frank with you, it just ticks them off. And I have had people assume that I am not Jewish. I have walked into, I remember a synagogue in particular, and someone said, okay, here's a Siddur. I'm such a Cantorial student. I had a Siddur right here on my desk. Someone said, welcome, here is our prayer book. We call it a Siddur. And, and I really wanted to punch this person in the neck. And so assume that they're Jewish. And okay, so that's number 2. Second, ask them lots of questions. Show them that you're interested in them. So what brought you to us today? Have you been to a lot of other shuls in the area? Where in town are you living? So those are just nice questions to ask. Now, what Rabbi Arnowitz taught me during our conversation is something that I really wanted to tell you all about. He said, because I was telling him about this experience at this Orthodox synagogue, actually, where somebody said to me, oh, well, they said, oh, do your parents live in Baltimore? I said, well, no, my parents are no longer living. And the man said, oh, well, do you observe their yard site? And what he was doing, and this is what Rabbi Arnowitz said, he was probing. He was asking me questions, not to build a relationship, but to get information from me. So the rabbi had a much more eloquent way of saying that. But, he was more like, he's trying to decide if I belong there. He's trying to, that man was literally trying to ask if I was somewhat religious. And everybody can tell. You can tell when someone's asking you questions, not because they're just curious about you, but because they're probing for information. They're trying to see if you belong. They're trying to see if you're dangerous to them. And the last thing I want to say, I have a few more things. Can you tell me about yourself? Tell me about yourself. That's an awesome thing to ask. Another thing is say, well, let me tell you about Westchester Jewish Center. I've been a member for 16 years. I came here because it's just such a warm environment. And then say, oh, have you met our Cantor? Have you met the rabbi? Let me introduce you to them. Okay, so I could go on and on.
These are good practices, by the way, whoever walks into those last ones should be ever. By the way, the language I used, I said, someone can tell if you're probing for information or probing for a relationship, and that the questions might be the same, but you can tell if someone's approaching you, if they're being genuine about trying to build a real relationship, or if they're just kind of like trying to figure you out and do you belong here, which starts with an assumption that you don't. And I think, that's what you've said very eloquently, David, is, when we start with the assumption by looking at someone that they do not belong, or they're likely not to belong, then even if you say everything you just said and you said it exactly right, someone will know. People have a sense if you're really caring and hugging, or if you're just kind of like poking, So I'm glad that, thank you for pointing that out. But I think it's important, because for many of us, we're like, oh, I say that anyway. Of course, I go over and I welcome someone to the shul, but it's recognizing that inherent bias of, I think this person is Jewish from the start, or I don't, and then how we step into it, I think makes a big difference, which I think maybe is a microcosm, and maybe this is a good way to segue our conversation a little bit, a microcosm of sort of the greater, conversation around race right now, which is, recognizing sort of the bias in our society and seeing how we may or may not be complicit in carrying that out. And if we are, how to address that. So I think those are not unrelated issues, and maybe you want to comment on that, and we'll segue to a little more of these the macro issues floating around right now.
Well, first, when you talked about the personal biases, that really sparked something within me. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I'd like to think I'm practically perfect in every way, but I am not. I put my foot in my mouth. I have actually contributed to racism. I mean, I remember when I was a teacher in Pittsburgh, I taught at a preschool. I taught at the JCC, actually. And I was the only person of color on the entire faculty. And, I didn't go to the director and say, I really feel like we can do better with hiring more teachers of color. When I see homeless people, there's a lot in my neighborhood. I definitely have caught myself giving more money to, like, if somebody is white and they tell me a sad story, I have found myself feeling much more sorry for them and wanting to give them money. I would say before I met, well, my partner now is white. So what I'm trying to say is, my whole life, I really refused. I mean, I wouldn't say it was a rule the last 5 years of my life, but like it was a subconscious rule that I was not going to date a black guy. Like I mean, I can only say that now that I'm really observing my behavior, but like it wouldn't have mattered if this black guy was Jewish. It was this internalized personal bias of racism that I'm realizing I had. I mean, when I have ordered Thai food on the phone, I get annoyed. I'm going to say I have gotten annoyed with the person I'm talking to because I can't understand them well. And then I go home and I complain to my partner about it. I was in the hospital a couple of years ago, and like I definitely assumed that the black guys working were orderlies and that the white guys were doctors. And then at one point I saw them all talking to each other, and I realized they're all wearing scrubs. That's all they're wearing. And I realized, oh my God, these black guys are doctors. And I just completely assumed they were orderlies. I have mixed up the janitorial staff at my former synagogue. I called Jorge Pablo, and I'm 100% sure Jorge went home and complained to his wife and said, I thought David was this beacon of racial justice. He doesn't even know who I am. I probably ruined his night. And then he thought, is he going to try to talk to me the next day? And he decided not to, clearly. So I'm telling you all, if I have these personal biases, if I, the anti-racism educator, have done these things, I know some of you have. And the thing is, I'm not going to waste my time feeling guilty. I'm making a promise to myself right now. I'm going to cut that out. I am absolutely going to realize when I'm giving more money to black or white homeless people. I'm going to be really polite to people on the phone at the Chinese food place because, for God's sakes, they are speaking a language that is not their native language over the phone. They can't even read my facial expressions. I'm going to go to my employers, the next synagogue I'm working at, and I'm going to say, where are all the Black people? Like, this is Washington, D.C., for God's sakes. I haven't been there yet. I'm just getting fired up. But I've sort of lost my place here. But all I'm saying is I'm making a choice that I've seen my contributions to racism, and I'm going to cut it out. And I'm going to get things wrong in the future. I'm going to say something stupid to someone, but I'm going to be aware of it. I'm going to learn. I'm going to apologize to that person. And I'm going to make a commitment to be more aware of my behavior.
That's great. Thank you for that. And I just want to fill in a couple of blanks in what you said. I appreciate your honesty and your candor. And this is an idea that I think maybe more of us have been reading about, but it's worth stating that the kind of racism that we're having a conversation about now, and I think the kind of racism that you're referring to is sort of this inherent bias racism. It's not the, neo-Nazi hate group racism that exists and is awful, and we should fight against that. But to only fight against that and say that's what racism is, I think is more and more being recognized as not enough. And that the truth is that we all have biases, and that we're not going to lose them. I think a popular saying, people say, well, I just don't see race. Oh. We might have even talked about this a little, David, I think when we chatted. But you're like, I don't see race. And, look, different people, we're talking in vast generalizations, we should say. We're talking in vast generalizations, and not every Black person agrees with what I'm about to say. Not every white person agrees with what I'm about to say. Not every racial activist agrees with what I'm about to say. But the basis of the conversation that you and I have had is that that's not such a great thing to say you don't see race. That in fact, actually recognizing that we do see race and how we might react differently so that we can work counter to that is better. And, to say we don't see race at all is not recognized. Like I wouldn't want someone to see me and be like, oh, I don't see a Jew. I just see a person. Well, actually, I'm proudly a Jew. I wear my kippah. I live that life. And you're not helping me that way. And similarly, people can be proud of their ethnicity, their background, whatever it be, by saying, well, I'm just going to ignore that, is also in its own way, maybe not recognizing the full human being before you. And again, I think this goes back to our conversation about when someone walks into the shul. So I just wanted to fill in that the conversation we're having now, when we personalize this idea of racism, it's not to say, no, we're not saying you're a racist, like you're working for hate groups and intentionally trying to work against somebody's success in the world. However, that in our inherent biases, we may be doing that. We probably are doing that. And the more conscious we are, the more we can recognize it, the more we can work to be part of the solution rather than part of the hindrances for people. Is that a fair?
Oh, everything you said is wonderful. And I'm going to add on to that, which is, I almost wanted to write them down, but I didn't. Okay, I'm going to start from the beginning. So I'm really glad you brought up the whole thing of, how many of you have heard somebody say to some person of color, I don't see race. I just see the human being. We're the human race. And that drives me crazy because there are things about myself that I'm proud of. I'm proud to be a little tall. I'm proud that I'm Jewish. I'm proud of my thick hair. You know what I'm also proud of? My skin color. I like my skin color. My skin color actually tells you a lot of things about me that I want to share with you. There's a story behind my skin color. And when you say to me, well, I don't see you as a race, or my favorite, and by favorite I mean my most hated, I'm colorblind. Why do you want to be blind to my color? I want you to see my color. When someone says to me a sentence like that, what I think they're really telling me is they don't want to see my race. They don't want to acknowledge that about me. And I want to acknowledge that about me. I want to tell you about me. And I want to hear about you. I want to hear about your own background. I will find that as equally fascinating because it's not my background. Oh, yes. And the other thing I wanted to say is, so Rabbi, you talked about like neo-Nazis, definite racists. And what I think the culture wants us to believe is that racism is when somebody is actively being mean to someone of color. And that is just not true. Being nice to someone of color does not make you not a racist. You know, it's like that, oh gosh, I don't want to get political here. There's a certain person in the governmental system right now who believes in giving vouchers. She believes in giving individual students opportunities to go to college, but she doesn't believe in making it so that all students have more of a fair shot at going to college on a macro level. And oh my God, I lost my train of thought because I'm thinking about that woman. Remind me, where was I, Rabbi? I'm sorry about this.
You were just talking about the difference between active racism or
Okay.
like being a neo-Nazi.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm back.
You're back.
And I'm back. So racism is not just being nice to that one person that you're helping go to college. Being an anti-racist is not about helping this one person. It's not about being nice to your Black coworkers. Being an anti-racist is about, okay, your eight-year-old comes home from school for winter break, and you ask your 8-year-old, so what important historical figures have you learned about this year? And little Jimmy says, well, I learned about Neil Armstrong. I learned about George Washington. I learned about the Wright brothers. And I learned about, let's say, Laurence Olivier. Being an anti-racist is going to your child's teacher and saying, why is my child only learning about white men? Why can't my child learn about Frida Kahlo or Yo-Yo Ma or Vera Wang or Squanto or Geronimo or Madam C.J. Walker or Toni Morrison? I just named 8. Oh, 7. Left out my pinky. So those are, when a child graduates from the 3rd grade and they have learned that there are so many people of color who are ascending to the heights of society, let's say little white Jimmy, he's going to turn to his Black female classmate and he's going to say, well, you clearly have just as much a chance as I do. And he's going to respect her as a person who could possibly be one of the greats in our culture. He's going to see her as an equal. But let's say the rest of that year, he only learns about one Black woman, maybe Condoleezza Rice, for instance. He's going to say, oh, well, you don't have a very high chance of being on this big list. Maybe you're not deserving of that. Maybe you don't belong there. So that is the kind of anti-racism behavior I'm expecting and wanting out of people. To notice that the subway station at Lexington Avenue, I mean, it's like a mansion. It's beautiful. 63rd Street subway station is, even the loudspeakers, it's like, you are at the 63rd Avenue Street subway station. Upcoming is a train. And then you go to, let's say, somewhere in Canarsie. And I've been there. I mean, my own subway station looks very much like that. There's puddles everywhere. There's a man urinating in the corner. You cannot understand the loudspeaker. It smells. And I'm telling you, that kind of thing is not tolerated in areas of the city where there is a high level of white people. There would literally be security guards to speak to a man urinating in the corner. And I'm telling you, it's that kind of stuff that is racism. I'm less worried about you not knowing the name of a Black person who you see every day. And I'm more worried, although you should know their name, I'm more worried about how white people are complacent to accept things like their child never even having a Black teacher. Okay, end of sermon.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the perspective. I think it's important. Let me ask you. I said I'd leave time for questions. We've got one so far. I encourage people to send more, although I have a list if you don't. But this one is very important. We spoke about this, and I think it's really important. And I will do my confessional at this point. So years ago, around the protests in Ferguson, in St. Louis, as well as in Baltimore, I got involved in interfaith dialogues around race and trying to make a difference where I was in Norfolk, Virginia. The Black Lives Matter movement was spawned around then, in that particular incarnation of itself. And they came out with a platform, right, a political platform that contained in it anti-Zionist language. I'm a very proud Zionist. And while I did not disengage from the movement of anti-racism, although we didn't call it that, this, by the way, these terms are constantly evolving. I want to remind the people who, well, that's not how I learned what racism was. Right. Well, we're learning more as society learns more and as conditions change. And that's why I wanted to point out the language. And and thank you for all those, say great examples, unfortunate examples of how racism plays out all around us. And we could do dozens and dozens more. But because this is a synagogue, and because I know that there are a lot of proud Jewish people and proud Zionists on the call who may also have felt that there were times when their Jewish identity and their activist identity in wanting to create equality and racial justice have felt like they've come into conflict. So for me, I disengaged from BLM specifically, but still tried to work, knew that it had to be a priority to work on that. Is that enough? I don't know. I'm fascinated by our conversations about it because your Jewish identity and your Black identity are sometimes come into the same kind of conflict right inside your very own self. So if you could address for us, how do you manage that? What do you do when you feel like your own identities are coming into conflict? I think we might be able to learn a lot for ourselves if you can share some about that.
So, okay. Gosh. Okay. Breath, David. See, the thing is, I have so many thoughts that I want to convey, and then they're in conflict with each other. Okay. So Black Lives Matter. Well, first off, the words Black Lives Matter is true. And everyone needs to say that. That being said, I am very aware that the organization called Black Lives Matter has had a problematic relationship with Israel. I'm also a proud Zionist. I love Israel. I want Israel to be a Jewish state. Now, You know, someone I used to serve a Republican synagogue, and I was really impressed with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And one of my congregants said to me, "How can you support that woman? She is anti-Israel and pro-Palestine and the whole works." And now, I don't believe that AOC is anti-Israel. I think she is doing a lot for Israel. But let's, for the sake of argument, say that she was, like so many of the liberal bleeding heart politicians, very much painting Israel as the villains. I think we have to accept that not all of our politicians will support our beliefs exactly as they are. I love AOC. I think she has done so many important things. I think she takes lawmakers to task for being greedy and self-serving. She's done so much for housing. She's done so much for healthcare. Has she done enough for my exact view of Israel? Possibly not. But I can still support her because I support the big pictures here. I'm aware that Nick Cannon was recently fired because he was saying anti-Semitic remarks. Being Black is not a monolith. Just because one Black person or just because many Black people say something, that does not mean that all Black people feel that way. Just like how I am sure I'm speaking to many Republicans and Democrats and liberals and conservatives right now, and you are all Jewish. You know, one Jew's opinion does not represent all Jews' opinions. And I think we can hold two truths. I feel the same way about Israel. I feel like Israel's leaders are not always taking love and care of their Palestinian citizens. I also think that Israel is an amazing country that is doing really amazing, wonderful things. And there are people there who really do care about the lives of Palestinians. Two truths can be the same here. And I can love a country without loving its leaders. I can love, I'm not going to say the word love. So Farrakhan, very problematic man. I love a lot of the things that he has said. There was this one talk show he was on where he was incredible, saying beautiful truths. I just think we have to be very careful to not let one organization or one person cloud our beliefs to think that anybody who looks like that person or is part of that group can be thought of to think the way that everyone thinks. You know, just because I am gay does not mean that I have the same beliefs as even my partner. Does this make any sense, Rabbi? Am I making any sort of
Yeah, I think, thank you. It's a hard topic. It's a hard question. I appreciate your allowing me to ask it. I think it's one that many of us struggle with. I think that what you are saying, or I want to summarize what you're saying is, this is complex stuff and we need to live in that complexity. And I think that we have a strong reaction to draw solid lines because solid lines are comfortable and safe, but that progress and really having integrity sometimes means working really hard to look at the complexity and to see that we can have allies even if we don't agree on everything, and to see that, I wouldn't want to think of all Black people as a monolith any more than I would want someone to look at us and see all white people as all Jewish people, or white people also, but Jewish people, to pick a minority, and think that we all have the same views because of that. So no, I think that's helpful. I think that for speaking for myself, things like that, anti-Semitic statements made by people, whatnot, are very triggering for me, because I carry the weight of thousands of years of anti-Semitism on my shoulders, whether I deserve to or not. I just do. I've experienced actually personally very little of it, thank God, but yet I appreciate its existence. I appreciate how it affects even in today's world many of our brethren, and we're seeing it more and more all around. Even if it has not directly impacted this synagogue, it's obviously impacted into terrible, catastrophic results other synagogues, and forced us to be much more cognizant of security and all these kinds of things. So it is hard to live when safety, the first thing you said, David, was about safety. And, I think that it feels, it's hard for us, at least me, to find that safe space. And it really is an act of bravery sometimes to step into these gaps and to try and see this in a complex way. So, but thank you for pointing it out, because I understand that you take that in a much more personal sense than we do. Okay, a few questions, if I may, coming from our group now. The first one is: standing inside a world of inclusion and dignity, and a world that works for everyone, please share about your commitment in the world. What are you up to in the world to make a difference on this front?
Well, I mean, what was thrown into my lap, which is in the when George Floyd was killed, my synagogue asked me to give a sermon about. I called it "Ways That White Jewish People Can Be Anti-Racism Educators," and that has strangely taken off. And I'm being asked. I was at Pelham Jewish Center recently, Rodef Shalom congregation in Pittsburgh. Hillel of Westchester, and now you all. And I mean, I would probably guess that most Black people do not want to be anti-racism educators. Most Black people are tired of trying to explain why they are nervous to name their son Jamal because his resume will be thrown out. But I like doing this a lot, and I've given several speeches out at my school, and I mean, I once took a conductor on the Amtrak to task because he said to everybody was getting onto the quiet car, and he said only to the Black lady, "Just so you know, this is the quiet car, there's no talking." And I said, "Why did you say that to her? You didn't say that to me. You didn't say that to any of the other white people." I didn't like calling myself white, but I think my point was being made. I'm aside from race, I'm volunteering at a soup kitchen tomorrow, which always makes me feel good. Whenever I'm feeling depressed, I find that it's just better to give back in some way. I gotta tell you, what am I up to in the world? Really, what I'm up to is yelling at strangers who go into the grocery store without masks on to put on your mask. That's sort of what I'm up to these days. It drives me insane. I wish I had a better answer for you other than I, as a personal citizen, I'm trying more and more to not let racism go by and me say nothing. Like, I mean, something that I'm ashamed of is that I saw this woman, a white woman at Whole Foods. She was giving this Black woman a really hard time trying to return something. And then when a white woman tried to return something, she was all smiles and nice about it. And I really wish I had said something. But this is another thing. I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier. I did something that I'm not proud of, and now I'm going to the next time I see something. I mean, and the thing is, it doesn't mean I have to, I don't know, start yelling and pounding my hands. It can simply mean, excuse me, miss, why did you give that first woman a hard time, but then you gave the other woman an easier time? And the thing is, I'm not going to be able to convince this racist white lady that she's racist, but I will have put in a little nugget in her mind so that she will try, she will subconsciously be a little bit more aware of her behavior. And that's what I want to charge you all with. When you see racism, when Uncle Roger says at Thanksgiving dinner something like, those Schwarzes are looting stores and they're just contributing to the problem, that's when you Shlomo, you need to say, Uncle Roger, your language is very racist. Those people who are looting stores and rioting, they are maddened with anger and pain. They tried speaking quietly, but no one is listening. They are in their wits' end. Their family members are being murdered. I mean, somebody explained to me, I come from a very middle-class Black family, and I can think of three right now, three relatives who have served time in prison. And most people don't have people in their family who have gone to prison. And, let's see. One was I'm not going to say the charges. That might make people feel weird. But what I'm going to say is that is the kind of thing that exists within every Black family. And, my Black family is respectable and upstanding citizens. So what am I doing in the world? I'm speaking up. I'm not letting people get away with racist behavior.
Awesome. Thank you. That was very powerful. And by the way, I want to point out that the diversity that you bring to the Jewish community because of that experience, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate your being here with us and being willing to share that experience. I know that a lot of what we're talking about can be triggering for us, for white people who are listening. Oh, I've said that, I've used that language. Am I a racist? And our reaction is to be like, no, I'm not. And I just want to point out, this is a safe space to sort of explore those ideas. And I appreciate you sort of providing us the setting to explore those things. A question about colorblindness, which may be one of the things that people have said and maybe find a little triggering, that we shouldn't, that's something that's not such a great thing to say. And the question is maybe taking it to a step more complex. By the way, folks, I know it's 11 o'clock. We have 3 questions here. I'm going to ask them all. And David, we'll try to move through them as quickly as we can to stick as close as we can to our timeline. So the question is, don't we need to sort of if my bias mind is a whiteboard, don't we need to erase it? Don't we need to become colorblind, alleviate our own biases before we can see your true identity? That I have to sort of empty the vessel before I can appreciate you for who you are. I'm paraphrasing what the person was saying. That maybe is that not actually a good goal to strive for, in order so that I can then see you for who you are and maybe change. Maybe that's how my biases get changed.
So, Herb, I'm reading your comment now. What I'm seeing is your big picture here, and it's an admirable one, and I validate that. So what do I want you to know about me? I love Star Trek. I am vegan. I love to do yoga. Um, I've been in a relationship for almost a year, and it's the longest one I've ever had, and I'm so grateful. These are um, these are all things about me that have nothing to do with my race, and I love that you want to see those things about me, and I think there's legitimacy to your comment, which is I want you to see me as a human being first, a person who has varied interests. There's a homeless man outside of the Key Foods near my house, and I said to him one day, "Look, I'm about to go grocery shopping. What can I get you?" And he said, "Can you get me Fruit Loops and some lactose milk? I'm lactose intolerant." And like, he's lactose intolerant. Like, he's lactose intolerant just like Peter Silverberg is lactose intolerant. He's a human. His tummy gets a little rumbly when he gets lactose. And I think you should definitely see everybody as the qualities that don't make them a race. Blackness is not the center of my identity. Um, I don't need it to be all that I am. It is who I am. It's not all that I am. Being Jewish, it is definitely who I am. It's not every facet of my identity. I mean, I wear this, but it's not. Um, okay, there's my quick answer to that.
That's really, I'm going to add to that. And if you don't mind,
Please.
that, what Judaism teaches us about people is that what makes them beautiful is the diversity, right? Like the rabbis and our rabbinic texts, which are not known, by the way, necessarily to be the most diverse and,
Yeah,
woke, as we might say.
Maimonides was not the most woke man.
Right. That being said, like it is very clear in our tradition in several places that what makes humanity beautiful and special and what makes God so incredible as our creator is that God could make us all the same, but all totally different. And so I think there is appreciating that sameness, that we're all human beings, but also, appreciating and celebrating that which makes us different is so important and so essential. And the other thing I would say, Herb, which is again, take it for what it's worth, is that I don't think we can actually be colorblind. I think it's a noble goal to say I'm going to erase all this from my head so that I can start from scratch and appreciate you for who you are. However, all kinds of psychological tests and show that it's not really a possibility. Well, it's good to pursue that. We still have to recognize that we have these biases, and or if we don't have to do anything. The suggestion is that we recognize that we have these biases, and therefore try and respond to the world knowing that we're looking through those glasses. Okay, what books do you recommend for people who want to understand more about anti-racism or Jews of color? That we want to do further reading. Do you have a reading list for us?
I was not prepared for this question, but I'll give you my first thoughts. So there's a book called, I think, Robin DiAngelo, called White Fragility. And she's smart. She's a white woman who knows white people. And a great introduction to her is to just check her out on YouTube. She's so eloquent, and she says things that are incredibly powerful. There's a bunch of autobiographies that I think are really, really great. Mara Gad, I don't remember the title of it, but it's something like being a Black Jewish woman. And she is a personal friend of mine. Oh my gosh, what is her name? There's another woman who, it's the book is called, I think my cousin Anise bought it for me when I was a teenager. I think it's called Black, White, and Jewish. It's about a young woman who grows up that way. So things I love to recommend these autobiographies because you have these people who have lived this life. And I think the best way we learn is hearing people's stories. I'm about to write my thesis on, I'm currently writing it, the experiences of Black Jewish Americans, musical experiences of Black Jewish Americans. So you can read that. I'd love to send an email to you and you could maybe send it out of some really great sources. I would just do all that I can if I were you to read, you know what, everybody, read Toni Morrison, read August Wilson, read Maya Angelou. There, that's your reading list.
Good answer. Good, thank you. Some of my favorites and some I haven't seen before that I'll look for. Okay, one more question, and give me three. We're gonna do this as a three item list. Someone asked, you know, when within our own congregation we have people who will be resistant to this whole idea of, you know, that I might be a racist or contributing to systematic racism in a way that, you know, and well, you know, you can read White Fragility about that if you're interested, which is the book that you were referring to. So what are three things that we can do as a congregation to help people sort of have this conversation without being triggered, to enter into this conversation in a productive way, in a respectful way, such that we can really have an honest and open dialogue. I'll put number one on, which is your being here, which again, I appreciate so much. I think your willingness to stand out and step up and do programs like this. I want to thank you so much. Your candor, your honesty, your earnestness is really helpful to create a safe space for us to reflect on these kinds of things. So thank you. So that's one. What would be three more kinds of things we can do to keep this conversation going in a way that's going to be productive and bring people together and not split them apart?
One, don't call a white person a racist. Never use that word. Don't imply that they're acting like a racist or being a racist. When you call a white person a racist, they will literally stop listening to you. And then nothing that you say will get through. What I like to say is that you are inadvertently contributing to racism. And you don't mean to, and it's not your fault. That is how you were raised, because you were raised in the United States. And every white person has internalized racism. Every person has internalized prejudice. So when you're having these conversations, I would just say, definitely don't use that word. Yeah, two, call people out. Say, but don't yell. Again, you want them to listen. Say, that comment is very offensive. Do you see that Black person as a child of God? That Black person has just as much right to liberty and happiness and is just as a child of God as you are. Three, every now and then a person of color will walk into your synagogue. Definitely use those tips I gave you. At the end of greeting them, after the service, go back up to them. How did you like the service? And tell them our next service will be next Friday or next Saturday at 9:30. That's an amazing way to welcome people. Okay, I gave you my three.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. And okay, so a couple things. First of all, there were a lot of resources that people put in, titles of books and whatnot, in the chat, which I have copied, and we'll find some way to put them together to send out when we send out the recording of the conversation. Thank you all for being active participants. Thank you, David, for being here and for giving us the opportunity. Sorry, your cousin Mitch is loud. Okay. For giving us the opportunity to sort of reflect on these things. I would like to encourage one more.
Sorry.
That's very insistent. Okay. I would like to encourage one more tip, which is ask questions that are uncomfortable. Find someone like David or me, and I'll point you towards someone like David, and ask the stupid questions. I think that we are very uncomfortable with being uncomfortable or with feeling stupid. And if you can find a resource, someone who you trust to speak to, and ask a question that, you know, hey, I did this, and now I don't know how was that okay? Was that, how would you feel if I had said that to you? What, you know, I used to moderate an interfaith dialogue on race. And I used to say, I asked everyone for their trust so that I could say stupid things and they wouldn't be offended. They should correct me, tell me, you know, why what I'm saying is wrong. And I promise not to be offended by their corrections if they promise not to be offended by my questions. And sometimes the only way we can make progress is to, you know, how do I know if I have a bias if I never put my toe in the water? How do I know about what's going on with racism if I never engage in the dialogue? You know, and so I want to encourage people to ask questions. Thank you all for being here to have this conversation with us. It's a conversation that we're going to continue as a congregation, and along with maybe an evaluation of our website. Thank you very much. And David, thank you so much for being with us. And I want to thank Barbara Novick, who was here, I don't know if she still is, who pointed out your other cousin who pointed you in our direction. I think it's been very valuable. It's been a valuable conversation for me, and I think and I hope it's been a valuable conversation for others who are here with us. So thank you for everything you're doing. Good luck with the school year starting soon. Oh, and one more comment that was made by somebody, I won't mention who they were. They said, you know what, as a woman, I often feel the same thing. I don't know when's the right time to speak up and when's not. And that, you know, we often err on the side of not speaking up. So it's not just about being Black, and it's not just about being Jewish. So many of our identities we see, you know, under fire so often, and we don't necessarily.
Can I add one thing? So when to speak up, when not to speak up, I'm going to repeat the words of Beverly Sills. She said, "I would rather regret having done something than regret having not done something." Regret having spoken to that person rudely, but don't regret saying nothing.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good advice. All right. Thank you all for being with us. Look for more information on similar programs coming down the line. You know, it's a complex world, and I appreciate you all being willing to engage in a complicated dialogue about it. Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.